This is Torah Restoration Ministries Radio with your host, Daniel John Lee, aka Preacher Dan, restoring Torah to the nations. And this is your host, Daniel John Lee, aka Preacher Dan, and you are listening to Torah Restoration Ministries Radio. It is November the 10th, 2009. Thank you for joining me today. I had a number of things that I wanted to cover today, but I'm kind of going to be putting most of this aside. I may get to some of this later in the show, but there's a pretty horrific news story that has just emerged, and I have a feeling it's going to dominate the show. Literally just down the street from where I live today, this morning, late this morning, there was a shooting. Details are still pretty sketchy on exactly what happened, but evidently a man who was estranged from his wife, armed, stormed into the Legacy drug testing center facility located on Martinazi and Warm Springs, which is right here in Tualatin. Literally, maybe a minute's drive from where I live, if that. And he shot and killed his wife, shot another man who's not been identified, in his 60s, and he was star-flighted to OHSU, injured another woman who evidently fled from the scene and went right across the street to the local subway to get help. And then the man evidently killed himself. And police were on the scene within a few minutes. I happened to be at a friend's house that was in the neighborhood, and I remember that morning and sort of early afternoon. And by the way, this all happened around 11. I think it was 11:48 when it was reported, and the shootings occurred just prior to that. I had heard a bunch of sirens, things going on, but I didn't think of anything. I just thought, well, maybe there's a fire or something going on. And then about 1:30, 1:45 in the afternoon, I left my friend's house, and I was cutting across Bruins Ferry down Warm Springs toward Martinazi. I was going to go to the bank at the Fred Meyer, but I couldn't get onto Martinazi from Warm Springs because everything had been cordoned off. As I got toward the end of Warm Springs, or rather where Warm Springs intersects Martinazi, and Martinazi is a primary vein, the north-south vein that goes into Tualatin. It was all cordoned off by there were tons of police. Media was everywhere. There was a helicopter hovering in the air. Everything had been just completely blocked off. And I couldn't tell what had happened. So I went to the Fred Meyer, went to the bank, and I'm talking to the bank manager, and he tells me that, evidently there was a shooting and a man shot someone at the drug testing center. It's pretty horrific because Tualatin, where I live, it's a very quiet town. It's not known for crime. In fact, really nothing like this on this magnitude occurs. Not even close. You'd be hard pressed to be mugged or to have a shoplifting incident happen to you in Tualatin, because it's just that type of neighborhood. It's middle class. It's about 26,000 people. Southwest of Portland. It's a very nice neighborhood, a very nice area. If you've driven in the Tualatin area, you know what I'm talking about. It's a very nice, classy area, and these things just don't happen. So the fact that this did happen is just absolutely horrific. It's just unbelievable. Sorry about that sound there. My phone just went off. What I want to discuss is, why did this happen? This hits close to home, literally, as well as figuratively. Why did this happen? I mean, of course, all the prognosticators will talk about the domestic violence issue and, the husband being estranged from the wife. Evidently, the wife had just divorced her husband on, I think it was October the 30th. He was served with the divorce papers on November the 4th. He was upset about the divorce. But I think if we want to go to the deeper root and how it would relate to this show, obviously there was a lack of Torah in this marriage between these two individuals. Um, but I want to go a bit further than that, because I want to. You see, I think a lot of problems that we are dealing with today um, is directly because of the church refusing to uphold the standards of righteousness and of Torah. And what I mean by that is that we have a limp-wristed, sloppy agape, anything goes type of gospel. Now, I don't know who these two individuals are, but I would be willing to bet that they have had some contact in some way, shape, or form with a church. And I'm willing to almost assure you that this church did not uphold the righteous standards of Torah. And had they done so, had the church that they had been exposed to as children or young adults or even currently in their lives, had that church upheld the righteous standards of Torah, the shooting probably would not have happened. Now, that's assuming that they've had a church background, but chances are they probably have. Most Americans have. And I tell you, on the day of judgment, the church is going to have a lot of blood on her hands because of her refusal to uphold the righteous standards of Torah. And that's how I think that an incident like this and the massacre that occurred at Fort Hood last week, how that impacts us. That we as believers need to be upholding the standards of Torah because we're going to be to blame for the evil that is rising among us if we don't, if we refuse. Because a limp-wristed, sloppy agape, anything goes gospel encourages evil and encourages things like this. And that's why we have shootings at Fort Hood and shootings, domestic violent shootings here in a quiet town known as Tualatin where nothing like this ever happens. It's a horrific day and a horrific incident. Evidently this couple had children whose lives will be forever altered. It's very, very horrific. And whatever the intentions of this husband was, and I'm not blaming all the blame on the husband, even though he obviously was the killer. Typically, in incidents like this, when it's involving a husband and wife, there's blame on both sides. That's typically how it goes. But the husband obviously was motivated purely by selfishness, had no thought for his children or for his family or anyone around him, certainly not his wife. And so we're left with two lives that are gone and children that are orphaned. And it's a horrific, horrific situation.